Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation, first of all. And I just want to add a little bit on top of what Pilar, Maria Teresa have mentioned, and I'm actually agreeing with many things already mentioned. But I think it's important to see the big picture here for Europe. I mean, technology has become really a kind of playground for geopolitics as well. And I think that sometimes there is a feeling in Europe that because we become somehow the referees in a big match between the United States and China, that's good enough, and we're doing regulation of the digital services and so on, and we feel that this is the right thing to do, and it is. But I think that we have to be aware that the referee will not win the match. The match is played between currently outside of Europe. And I think that we should have this objective, and therefore this debate comes really at the right point in time to also broaden the scope and to think about how we can really create European leadership in technology, in digitalization as well. And of course, that needs to be based on our values. And actually, I would go even a step further. I think that becoming a leader in technology and digitalization will be maybe the most important issue to be able to defend our values really in the world. I think that it's important to understand that leadership is mainly kind of created by creating values. So values are defended by value. And I think that the pandemic has given us a great chance here. It has been really accelerating digitalization across Europe in a couple of weeks, like we would have seen maybe in years. And we've seen that it has been a wake-up call for many, especially smaller businesses, that they need to really kind of step up their game and digitalize and become more efficient and in using digital technologies and possibilities. From Telefonica's side, we have already a while ago asked for what we call a new digital deal for Europe to really be able to build back better our economies after this pandemic and after the economic crisis created by it. So in the end, what we ask for is a kind of joint approach, as we just heard also from the Commission and from the Parliament, to come together in a public-private cooperation and try to do this kind of step forward for Europe. Of course, for us, a key objective needs to be ultra-high-speed broadband and connectivity networks across Europe. That means fiber and 5G, to be very specific. Because that's really the basis for this kind of twin transitions, the green one and the digital one, which are, from my point of view, totally linked to each other. So we need to have really these kind of ultra high speed networks to everyone, to be honest, to be able to decarbonize and create digital innovation across Europe. And unfortunately, there comes the bad news, because Europe has been really bad over the last years in creating investments in this kind of infrastructure. We can compare it with the United States or with Asian countries, but we see that actually we are lagging here. But there are also kind of hopes and shimmers of hopes. One is Spain, for example. Spain is the leader for fiber connectivity in Europe, and it's actually just next to Japan and Korea in the world. So there are fiber networks going to 75% of households in Spain, and that's amazing. And it has been done actually not so much with subsidies and public support, but it has been done just by a change of regulation. It has been just put the focus of regulation just on opening the crucial bottlenecks, and then basically let competition do the rest. And I think that's something we should not forget. The most important thing is to get the regulatory frameworks right to attract these investments. And I would just put a highlight here on 5G. I personally believe that, for example, spectrum policies in Europe needs a profound rethink. Europe's operator have paid for 3 and 4G licenses around 150 billion over the last years. And I think that these are the 150 billions maybe missing in investments across Europe. They are in finance minister's coffins, and that's great for the finance minister, but it's not great for people. So I think that for 5G, we should kind of consider changing spectrum policies and not go for maximizing profits, but rather for prioritizing coverage across Europe, for example. Of course, for white spots, we also will need, as it was mentioned already, some form of public-private partnerships and public subsidies. And here again, just to highlight, that we have to be careful to get the full picture right again. There are already some issues with state aid appearing, and I think that's something that we have to be very careful with, that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot again by doing contradictory policies actually across Europe. And let me finish with saying that in the end, there's also a big space in innovation in technology for networks. Networks are changing a lot. In the future, we will have much more software-based networks, open platforms, much more flexible networks as well. For example, in 5G, you will be able to slice the network for specific usages of the industry. And these are all issues that will create a lot of innovation across the world, actually. And Europe should kind of, with this tradition of being a leader in connectivity and in technology for networks, should kind of be focused on that as well. Just to mention the issue of latency, a lot of people speak about 5G and the latency of the networks, and that it's faster, and that's very true. But actually, this latency would only be achieved if we kind of create edge computing platforms across our European networks. That means that we will create kind of mini data centers in the network to be able to have the information as close to the customer as possible. It will not be created by centralized huge data centers. And that is, for example, a possibility for Europe, because we have the tradition of decentralized infrastructures. We have telecom operators that can do these things. And I would kind of think about these kind of key technologies and changes also in broadband connectivity that will create a lot of innovation over the next years, and where Europe can be very well placed. Open RAN is another example, and so on. I will not go into details here. So I think that focusing on that and focusing on creating the right policy frameworks, holistic ones, could really unleash a lot of investments in networks across Europe. Thank you.